Because of Excel's spreadsheet size, with 16,000 plus columns and over 1 million rows, it ideally lends itself to the storage of data without the need to actually have a custom database built. Anybody dealing with lots of information will be fairly familiar with using Excel as a database package. It doesn't have the same querying and reporting options, but it is great for manipulating the raw data. So if we take our employees data file, which is available in your working folder, we're going to have a look at some of those exploration options. First of which is the ability to effectively freeze the headings on the page. So as you're dealing with a spreadsheet of information, as we have here, as you scroll down, the top row disappears. So then you don't know what each of the columns is about. And if you scroll to the right, the columns on the left disappear. And then you're not really sure who this is that lives in West Yorkshire because you can't see their name. So we need to look at the ability to freeze rows and columns. Luckily, on the view ribbon, there is a freeze panes option. Now it has a drop-down arrow because of the option to freeze panes. Now if you choose the first option here, where your cursor is on the page is important because that's the point it will freeze things at. Luckily, however, there are two nice options, which is to freeze the top row. And if I choose that option, you'll see you get a faint horizontal line below the top row. And as you scroll down the page and back up the page, the top row, so row 1, remains frozen on the screen. So at all times, you can see the column headings. Now the other option here, which requires no placement of the cursor, is to freeze the first column. So if we choose that option, then the first column gets frozen. And as we scroll to the right, you see the ID remains on the screen at all times. Now that's fine and it works great, except if what you're after freezing is not the top row or not the first column. I would prefer to be able to see the first 4 columns really, so that I can see the whole name as I scroll to the right. So as I go to the right here, I'd still like to be able to see the name of the person's row I'm on. So first thing to do is to unfreeze what's been frozen. From the freeze panes option, I can unfreeze the panes. And we go back to being normal rows and columns. Now I want to place the cursor in the right place to do what I want. If, for example, I place the cursor here in E2, then go to freeze panes and choose freeze panes, so not one of the two choices that will freeze either the top row or the first column, what will now happen when I choose freeze panes is all the rows above this point will be frozen on the screen and all the columns to the left of this point will be frozen on the screen. So row 1 will always be visible and columns A, B, C and D will always be visible. So if I choose freeze panes now, we get 2 lines, a horizontal and a vertical, which indicate the frozen points. So when I scroll down, I still see all the column headings. And when I scroll to the right and then the left, I still see the first 4 columns. They do not remove themselves from the screen. So as I keep going to the right, I know whose data I'm looking at. So I can see Mary Smith works in accounts and I can move her to the sales department and I know I'm dealing with the right person because I can see their name. So that's freezing panes. It does matter where the cursor is. If I unfreeze these panes and I just happen to have the cursor here, choose freeze panes and then freeze panes, it gets frozen at this point above and to the left. So now I can scroll up and down and to the right, but this area here remains on the screen at all times and all of these rows remain on the screens at all times. Not what I was after. So if you do it inadvertently in the wrong place, you simply unfreeze the panes. Make sure your cursor is in the right place, then freeze panes. And everything above and to the left of the frozen point remains on the screen at all times. Now an alternative to freezing panes is actually to split the screen. So let's unfreeze panes. If I place my cursor here, for example, because the split does matter where your cursor is, and click split, it splits my spreadsheet at the point I am at, in this case into 4 blocks. Now these 4 blocks, unlike the frozen panes that keep a row or column or number of columns or number of rows on the screen at all times, what effectively you've done here is create 4 separate scrollable areas. So I could enter this section here and actually scroll down and to the right, and I'm looking effectively in this top half at much lower than I am in the bottom half here. Now that can get quite confusing. So I'm not a massive fan of split screen, but I know people that are, because it does mean you can look effectively at the top of a sheet and then scroll this to look at the bottom of a sheet, and you don't have to see everything in between. So that's split screen, and the split screen will split at the point your cursor is. If I click split screen again, it will remove it. If I click it here, split, that then becomes a split point, and you have 4 areas of your spreadsheet. The preference, however, is to freeze frames, with the option to freeze the top row or the first column, or freeze at the point your cursor is, at which case everything on the left and everything above will remain frozen until you unfreeze frames.